Sounds good.
Okay. Tri-City Sports Now, Marky Bilson, and I've just made the signal. Alex Daugherty of OnTheForecheck.com, one of the premier Predators writers out there, is coming in from the bullpen here to relieve Joe Rexrode. But I know that time was there. If you're listening on the air and you're not watching on Facebook, I do want to say what he said when I asked him about the dichotomy between football and basketball, comparing it at Tennessee and at Michigan State. And what he actually said, and I thought this was really intriguing, was that he compared Tennessee to Michigan in that, they're going to support the teams when they win. Football's always going to be number one. But then if the basketball team wins, that's when that fan base really picks up. Baseball team, what have you. I mean, I've listened to talk shows in Knoxville where callers want to know, how'd the softball team do yesterday? This sort of thing. Not the greatest call in the world, but shows you the interest in a team when it is winning. And I thought that was a great point. Then going to Alex Daugherty, he mentioned comparing that maybe to Nashville. Look how popular the Predators are. They're taking, you've only got so much disposable income. Not everyone is Donald Trump or Ross Perot here or Bill Gates. And the Predators are taking fans, and people are going to Predators games that maybe 10 years ago they might have gone to a Belmont basketball game or a bad Vanderbilt Commodores basketball game. And Alex Daugherty on the forecheck, I guess a 9-game winning streak for the Predators, the longest in franchise history. That's happening more and more and more. Hey, does anybody in Nashville care about Lipscomb going to the NCAAs, or is it all about the Preds?
I imagine there's probably some people that care about that kind of stuff, but the Predators have taken over, I would say, the number one spot in terms of the athletic event of the city to go to. I mean, Titans games are always going to be well viewed on TV. I mean, the ratings for a Titans game will pretty much beat a Predators game no matter what it is. But in terms of attending an actual game, Predators tickets are the hottest thing you can get. In fact, recently, it was announced that there's now a wait list for season tickets for the Predators, and the Titans have had that for a while, but the Predators have never had that, and that is really unprecedented. I mean, that's really saying something about how many folks out there are trying to get in. Now, it's a smaller arena, only holds about 17,000, so you're trying to squeeze in a lot of people, but I mean, there was a time 10 years ago when they couldn't get 12,000 in there, and now they're regularly selling out, 94 sellouts in a row, and have a wait list for season tickets. But yeah, it's the number one ticket in town in terms of sports.
And fans love a winner, obviously. That's why I'm having you on here. Last game out, that defeated the Dallas Stars 2-0. Pekka Rinne, talk about him a lot. It's now 50 career shutouts for him. And, I mean, talk a lot about in the Western Conference that Marc-Andre Fleury does in Vegas. But to me, he's always been a goalie that maybe is a little susceptible to allowing the soft goal. And I think his career shutout totals, which are not necessarily that high for a goalie who's been around for about 15 years like he has, proves that. Well, Rinne, now he's got his 50th shutout and such, 7th of the year. It was last year the goalie that can carry the team, but is he actually improved from last season, in your opinion?
Oh, he's improved. He's having the best, I would say, having the best season of his life in terms of his play on the ice. If you look at his career, he's sort of taken. He had a huge start. The first 3 or 4 years that he was the regular starter, he was a Vezina finalist and he was an all-star. He was a huge part of it, and then when the hip surgery happened in 2013, he really took a dip, as you might imagine. I mean, that kind of surgery can end a career. And then there was the botch, the infection that happened afterwards. So he had this huge dip as well for about 2 or 3 years, and now he's finally back around. He's healthy. He's completely healthy. He's a freak of nature in terms of athleticism, especially compared to most goalies. I mean, he's having an unreal year, and he's also changed his game a little bit. Ben Vanderklok, the goalie coach for the Predators, has done a great job kind of helping him track the puck a little bit more. He does a lot more staying behind in the net as opposed to coming out. He was very, very aggressive in his first few years in the league, using that athleticism. But now he can kind of trust his athleticism to hold up, and he can do a lot more kind of waiting for the play to happen and kind of paying attention. It's really great to see. He's been absolutely by far the MVP of the Predators so far this year.
Well, the Predators have won 9 in a row. What's been the key other than Rene? I know they've made some different line changes, won some dramatic games, or talked about that, but what in your opinion has been the key to the success here over the last 9 games?
So in hockey, you've got your top 2 scoring lines who are called on to get the goals. They're the guys that are the good shooters and the good playmakers, and then your bottom 2 lines traditionally are more physical players trying to do maybe more role playing, get an offensive whistle so the goal scorers can come on. Well, the last 9 games, the bottom 6 forwards, Austin Watson, Colton Sissons, Calle Yarncroke, Nick Bonino, all those guys have been producing really, really high, really, really excellent hockey in terms of offensive. I mean, they've been controlling play up and down the ice. The top line's been fine too, but they've been scoring 4 and 5 goals a game for the last 9 games, and those bottom players are really the reason for it. So the depth on the Predators, the forward depth on the Predators has been outstanding. They are the deepest team the Predators have ever had. In fact, of all the teams in the league, the Predators have the most players with at least 20 points. They have 14 players with at least 20 points. No other team has more than 12. So they are the deepest team in the league, and they're hitting their stride at the right time.
Well, just to explain, if people aren't aware of the standings, the Predators now, they've gotten in the left lane, and they've passed the Vegas Golden Knights, who really are a wonderful story, for the first place, best record overall in the Western Conference by 6 points now, by the way, with 95 points. And they're only one back of the NHL lead. Tampa Bay leads the NHL with 96 points this season. So this shows you a little bit. And remember, Nashville last year was the 8th seed that kind of rode, as I mentioned before, Pekka Rinne to the Stanley Cup Finals, and then the Cinderella season ended against the Penguins, much like 25 years before the Penguins ended the Minnesota North Stars Cinderella season. They were an 8th seed that played Mario Lemieux's Penguins for the Stanley Cup in days of yore and such. And, one of the reasons why I remember that is that I did grow up with hockey, and yes, Mario Lemieux. But I want to see if you can answer this. They now have, I believe, let's see here, the Predators Cup. That's been going on, and you've been covering it on the forecheck.com. Brentwood High and Montgomery Bell Academy, admittedly not schools from around here, but what is the developmental scene, in your opinion, in Tennessee, certainly in Middle Tennessee, and there are also some schools in West Tennessee that play the sport as well. I realize it's all about amateur in developing the players, but tell me this, just what is the developmental system like? Could we see some future professionals coming out of the Middle and West Tennessee areas?
I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be a long time before you'll see that. It's going to be hard to get hockey to that stage. But because if you think about the real factories for hockey in North America, obviously Canada, Minnesota's big. The upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin are big. And it's hard to say that there's any real momentum in that way, just because I think that, obviously the other big sports, the football, basketball, baseball, even soccer, pull so many athletes into that direction. So I don't think that you're going to see that anytime soon, but it doesn't mean there's not good hockey played. And local Nashville ice hockey is big, especially among the private schools. And then you've got Alabama Huntsville that has a good team. There's really some pretty good local hockey being played. I just don't know. I don't know if it's really going to generate a ton of talent into the NHL for the next decade or so. It's going to take a while.
Well, I remember it took a while, like I said, when I lived in Pennsylvania, but, Pittsburgh and Philly are fertile, hockey hotbeds, if you will, now. The goalkeeper for the USA Olympic team was from Erie, and I believe they had 3 other players from the Philadelphia area on the USA Olympic team. Now, that didn't happen years ago. That it was strictly Massachusetts, Minnesota, I don't know, maybe a Rhode Island or something like that. But yeah, now there is more New York. I think the area is growing, and I mention that because, I, for a period of time, was the play-by-play broadcaster of the Johnstown Tomahawks, which is a junior hockey team. And they actually did have a player from Tennessee, from Franklin. So there you go. And a family would drive up to Johnstown from Middle Tennessee to see him play. So, I mean, it's starting to happen. I can tell you that, And I also like to say that in the 70s, for a period of time, hockey was, believe it or not, a varsity sport in Knoxville.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that. I think here, though, I would be willing to bet that most of the hockey talent that is coming out of the southern region of the United States is transplants from other places. I mean, like for example, Blake Jeffreyon, who was a Predator for a little while, he's the grandson of Boom Boom Jeffreyon. Obviously, they moved here, so it's tough to see a really from the roots up kind of growth of hockey, because the people that are really born and bred here in Tennessee, especially, are only playing football and baseball, and so it's like it's going to be a long time before you see just a real from the ground up kind of growth of hockey talent. But it's not impossible. You just got to get more rinks and more people interested in the game. That's
why I mentioned that I really want a new arena in this area, because if you build one with for a pad of ice, not only could you conceivably have a minor league hockey team here, say in the ECHL in the Tri-Cities, but you could have those people that come in at 5 or 4 in the morning and they practice, the youth teams, the figure skaters, all of that, and it becomes a viable 365-day event venue. It isn't just what Freedom Hall here is in Johnson City, Tennessee, which is a home for ETSU basketball and then not much else. Anyway, I know you've done a podcast here on ontheforecheck.com, but one of the things I saw, Mike Fisher was back, and he was back on the scores list during this winning streak. We talked a little bit about his role on the team before, but yeah, a pleasant surprise here. Is he doing more than expected in his return?
I'd say so. I mean, he looks just fine to me. I mean, I think he'll contribute about 10 minutes a game. He'll play on the bottom line somewhere. Like I said, those bottom 2 lines have been playing well, and he's a part of that. He did score a goal his first game back. He'll probably play against the Ducks tonight, a heavier team. Fisher can bring a physical presence that not a lot of players can bring, and he can take faceoffs, he can score goals, he can play defense, he can play penalty kill, he can play power play. So he's just a versatile player. It makes perfect sense for him to be in this lineup, and also to play him sparingly so that he can actually play in a cup final. Because here's one thing that people should know. I not to get the cart before the horse, but if you were to fast forward and this team goes to the Stanley Cup final, and you play, and somehow they win it, and they get their names on the cup. Well, Mike Fisher's name wouldn't be on the cup unless he plays in a Stanley Cup final game.
There you go.
Play in at least half your team's regular season games, or have to play in a Stanley Cup final game. So if he wants to get there, he's got to rest up and play hard enough to get there.
I'm reminded now of an episode of Boston Legal, that old TV show, and William Shatner's character was actually trying to, with an engraving tool, put his name on the Stanley Cup. He thought that he had some sort of success rolling the Bruins Cup win or something. It was a very funny scene at the time. Hey, I do want to ask you this, though. When did we, and you mentioned this on your podcast, when did we start counting wins and losses for general managers? Not that I think Predators fans are complaining, but when did that all start?
It started with, as I understand it, the podcast that I did with J.R. Lynn, he brought this up. It really just started with one guy just decided to write a book about general managing in hockey, and went back and calculated it. And as far as I know, no other general managing in sports does that. I don't think they do that in football or in basketball or baseball. Certainly, if it's in baseball, I would imagine George Steinbrenner probably has quite a high.
He was the owner. He wasn't. He went through general managers like he did baseball,
okay.
Like he did managers, to tell you the truth. But yeah, go ahead.
There you go. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure why all of a sudden they started counting it, but here's the thing that this Predators franchise does that I think that they're pretty successful at. When they find an angle, a positive angle that they can put on this team and sort of brand the team in some way. There was a story a little while ago. ESPN said that the Nashville Predators were the #1 franchise in sports. You see that all over the building now, and so like they take that and they run with it. Well, with this general managing wins thing with David Boyle, they take it, they run with it. They're really good at identifying those really important positive pieces of branding and using them as best they can.
Yeah, that is a real Tennessee thing. I know that in other markets I've worked at, there's a harp of the negative and such. But yeah, in Tennessee, there really is a lot of propaganda out there. But yeah, you mentioned Poyle. He passes Glenn Sather on the very new general manager's victory list. And I mean, Glenn Sather is a legend, and I don't think Poyle's name quite was as prominent in hockey history as Sather's was. But nevertheless, it's sort of like, hey, wait a minute, I'm here, and more positive publicity for the Predators. #1 organization in sports, USA Today said the Predators were. Why did they say that?
I think it was based on I think a number of factors. I think it was attendance, fan experience, cost of the game, the after game experience, like where the arena is located, all that kind of stuff. Right? As I understand it. And by the way, on Glenn Sather, I would say that if David Poyle could get even half the Stanley Cup wins that guy had, I think he'd be happier than with the wins record.
Yeah, that is sort of. I was mentioning, for instance, we had a local high school coach, Graham Clark, who is a high school coach at Dobbins Bennett. Dobbins Bennett has more football victories than any other state in any other program in Tennessee, and he has the most victory. He coached 24 years, so you racked them up. But the thing about the dirty little secret was no state titles. So,
yeah.
There was that, it becomes sort of like, oh, you're the Marv Levy, and even he won the Grey Cup. Speaking of hockey and, that sort of thing right there. So, by the way, I go through the podcast and Ryan Hartman, what were your first impressions of him?
He's fitting in perfectly. He is a great combination of several players that were already on the roster. He's got a lot of speed. He's got some skill. He can play physical. I mean, honestly, he looks like a young Mike Fisher. To be honest, he's even got the hairstyle of Mike Fisher when you go back to his early days with the Senators. But no, he's very similar to that kind of player. He plays more on the wing than he does as a centerman. But he's a great fit to this team. I mean, he can plug in almost anywhere.
And another thing, the funny thing, though, if we want to talk about the journalistic standpoint, I know in your podcast you were saying, boy, 9-game winning streak, general manager sets a record, legends coming back, nothing but victories, even a lease extension looks good. You asked this, what is wrong with the Predators? Or did they run out of, jalapenos at the nacho table? What's wrong with the Predators?
Yeah, exactly. It's like... what we do is we try to find at least something wrong with them. I mean, I don't know. The power play doesn't score every time. Got to complain about that. And sometimes the goal actually does get by Pecorine. But, no, there's really not much to complain about. I mean, it's fun to watch this team right now. And tonight they go for 10 wins in a row against the Ducks, the old, hated Anaheim Ducks, who the Predators seem to have their number. So we'll see if they can make it happen.
I hope so, because I hate at least they're not the Mighty Ducks. I mean, they're named after a by now forgotten movie, for crying out loud. How do you get millennials into, the Ducks? Why is there? They're not from Oregon. What's the, and all that. Hey, the players get all the chicks, the GM gets all the wins, the team gets all the fans, and Alex Daugherty gets all the scoops for the Nashville Predators, and that's why we had them on 9 in a row, and really they are right now in line for the #1 seed in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and certainly therefore with the hot goalie and all they would be the trendy pick to repeat as conference champions once the Stanley Cup playoffs come around, and they're only about a month away. It's a wonderful time, is it not, Alex Daugherty? Some thoughts on baseball to complete the show. Tri-City Sports Now after this. Did you like